Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest, a podcast dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoob Decker, and I am an artist and your host. PMI is an exploration in meeting some incredible artists, learning about their craft, and exploring what makes them create. I am using touring with musical theater across the country as a method to meet new artists across the country, and it has been amazing. This is my first guest that I have met because of Pique My Interest, and the experience was incredible by immersing myself in Syracuse's gear factory and witnessing many mediums of art. Clove Flores is an inspirational artist who piqued my interest with her mural art. I soon learned that she also tattoos, paints, constructs, and much, much more. She encourages you to step out of your fears with confidence into your art endeavors. She insists that anything can be broken down into steps, and those steps are the process. Clove is learning how to be a fully self-supported artist, but also knows that support from friends, family, and community is everything. This episode was recorded on February 1st, 2024 in Syracuse, New York. I hope that you can look up their work and your interest is piqued. I hope you are having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode I've titled Magical Surrealism. Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest. I'm currently in Syracuse, New York, more specifically at the Gear Factory, and I'm sitting with a very unique artist, Clove Flores. Clove, how are you doing today?
I'm good, yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Wonderful. Can you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, my name is Clove. I am a full-time artist. I am based in Syracuse, not originally from, but I found a lot of love for this city that has given me the opportunity to expand into my fullest expression as an artist.
Wonderful. What piqued my interest about you was your mural art, but what would you say your craft is?
Well, I try not to limit myself. I am still trying to come up with the right term that fully encompasses how I create, but I would say experiential, immersive art really drives my practice in whatever medium I'm exploring.
Lots of different mediums. We've been discussing that all morning. It's been great. What makes your work different than others who also do your craft as well?
Yes. No, that is a great question. Ultimately, my practice is driven by my connection to what I perceive as the divine and my own relationship to my spirituality. So, interestingly, I really would categorize my artistic style as magical surrealism, and that quality of my expression that is ultimately rooted in a more ethereal activation I don't necessarily see within other artists who are doing borderline realism or exploring mediums in the similar ways that I am.
And what's your background? Where are you from? Do you have any education? And what was the upbringing that made you a creator?
Well, it's a long story, but I first held a paintbrush when I was 4 years old, a pretty thick, 2.5 inch, commercial painting brush that my dad taught me how to use. He had a painting business, and I was very comfortable. We would go up in the lifts with him when I was very young. This is when we lived in Colorado Springs. And so I would say, as an artist, exposure to his knowledge from a very young age has really underlined my growth throughout my life with a level of confidence and security. I didn't go to art school. I ultimately didn't feel that it was a necessary investment monetarily, but I moved into the gear factory. Should I
Oh, you're fine. Keep
edit
going.
those out? Okay.
No, this is great. I love working or doing things in the artist studio because it just gives me the feel of like how you work as well. For those listening, we're in the Gear Factory, which is a ginormous studio that houses probably hundreds of artists. So if you're listening, there might be people coming in and out and working on things here and there. But yeah, no, I love it. It's great.
Cool. Yeah, lovely. So yeah, I landed at the Gear Factory in 2020. I went to school for expeditionary studies, which is like leading people in the backcountry, like climbing and paddling and hiking. And so that's what I decided to, that's the schooling I decided to invest in. And then in 2020, my life got turned upside down and I had to move back to Syracuse. And I landed at the Gear Factory through different friends that I knew, and it was as the gear was really just becoming, like just opening up for residential living. It was once a fully abandoned factory. It's like 5 stories. All the windows were cinder blocked. It was, set for demolition, I'm sure, at some point. And the owner had, a vision to revitalize this huge project that was honestly an eyesore. And now it is the gear, which is honestly kind of acting in many ways as the nexus point for this cultural and creative renaissance that's happening at the gear or in Syracuse. So I decided not to go to art school, but effectively, like moving into the Gear Factory has served as the most immersive education in art that honestly I could ask for. Mm-hmm. I've had many mentors, tattoo, painting, carpentry, by way of just like being around highly skilled and visionary individuals and living and working around them in a very intimate way. So
I mean, it is a very unique situation. I mean, you yourself are just surrounded by hundreds of different artists that have different mediums. Mm-hmm. I mean, just sitting in this room alone, there's so many different sizes and shapes of art pieces and different colors. I mean, there's a piano in the middle of the room. There's a black light glowing with some impressionistic stuff over there. I mean, it's just really it's such a unique place to be.
There's a giant disco ball.
I didn't see the disco ball.
That was actually, sorry, a little fun fact. That disco ball, I'm pretty sure, was at J-Lo's 50th birthday.
Of course.
Party.
Right on. Gotta carry a piece of J-Lo with you. But yeah, I mean, just being here, you're just surrounded by different artists. And how is it hard, or it's so hard not to draw inspiration from them.
Truly.
That's really, really interesting. I love that. As an artist, one of the hardest things that we strive for is success. Do you consider yourself a successful artist, and what is success in your craft?
It's interesting. It's something I've been thinking about a lot in this last year. I took the leap to be self-employed almost a year ago. So, as a young artist, I feel very accomplished in my efforts. I just finished my first mural in October. I will just also finished my first residency and solo exhibition mid-January. I'm actively taking strides to expand into new mediums and explore how to bring my visions into material reality in a way that's very fulfilling. So in those ways, I feel very sound and confident in my successes, but also I'm learning like financial literacy and how to sustain,
the things that aren't taught in the classroom.
Yes, actually. And, also we're, generationally, like I'm fully self-funded and, my family hasn't really gone to school and I have a really strong support, but no one has taught me really how to play the game. So in that way, it's interesting because I am learning how to manage to build the foundation and ultimately manage the structure of my career that can help me really achieve like the success that I know is possible. Mm-hmm. So I feel successful, but also not.
Right. That's something that we're all striving for.
Yeah.
But it's just something I always ask artists, just because hopefully for all my peakers out there, my listeners, that it might just give some inspiration, a little bit of like knowledge that, success isn't necessarily selling a piece to a museum. It could just be the fulfillment of finishing a piece. Mm-hmm. It could be anything. All right, let's get into it a little bit. How do you start your creation process?
I'm very intuitively guided. So I've learned that when I create for product, the piece dies. So like with this residency that I just completed, I basically had 12 days to work within this new gallery space that opened at the Gear Factory, and within that 12-day residency, the public was welcome to come and visit me and interact with my creation process and kind of witness how a body of work comes to be. And it was interesting because I really challenged myself to wait until I was within that capsule to activate what would become that specific creation process. And it showed me, I was able to almost identify my own personal formula, because the residency and the body of work was very successful and I do feel very fulfilled with what came of it, and it was really ruled by intuition. So I had a lot of reference books that fascinate me. I'm very fascinated by ultimately physics and geometry and color and light, and I kind of just surrounded myself with all of these books that, even if I haven't read them per se, even just visually, they spark something for me. And within that, I had all these sketch papers taped to the wall, and I just let myself draw what immediately fascinated me visually. And from that came the central pillar of what now I feel is shaping my career, actually, which is working with geometric solids. So
yeah, we're sitting right next to a
dodecahedron. Yes. Yeah, it's a beautiful shape. It's comprised of only pentagons. And it's fascinating because I basically drew out, I had this book about sacred geometry, and there was this page about Plato's 5 perfect solids, which are the only shapes within reality that are comprised of one shape over and over again. So they are geometrically pure, and there's only 5 of them. So I drew those out. They were the first things I drew out on those sketch papers, and I ended up making these sculptures, these lanterns that are quite large, varying sizes, of each of the 5 solids. Yeah.
This is what, 4 feet tall, maybe?
A bit more. It's more like 6 feet.
6 feet tall?
Yeah. Yeah, the dodeca is the biggest one. It's about 6 feet. I tried to build one that was 10.5 feet. I was very overzealous.
Why the size? Why so big?
I'm very fascinated by immersion.
Okay. And
I think that's where in trying to identify who I am, what drives me as an artist and what kind of artist I am, experiential art is feeling more and more relevant, because I personally like to be fully held by space. And that's why I'm interested in murals, over like paintings.
Uh-huh.
Although I do paint, but I really don't like paint on canvas like super often. I love murals. I love the scale. I love sculptures that you can like step into. I love, like I'm also a set painter, so creating like illusions of space with like play sets or movie sets. It's just all very fascinating to me.
Yeah, that I find that really interesting. Your passion for scale, which I think definitely reflects the murals, which is what drew me towards you at the beginning. And then learning that you are just like the perfect pique my interest guest. You have so many different mediums.
My interest is so piqued.
But also learning about how free-spirited you are and how much you like to break the rules with art, which is what we love to do. To learn about murals, which is kind of I'd say a more traditional art form, because you're trying to find something that everybody will enjoy, or you might have been commissioned to do it for somebody, so it needs to look a certain way. So that's what I'm interested in a little bit, is how do you find that balance between your creativity, which once again we're just in this world of awesome art, to fitting something that fits what somebody else wants, or to fit into this grid that they need or something.
Yeah, totally. Well, what's interesting about the mural that my first mural is that the design is fully of my own conception. It wasn't the RFP, the like call out for this specific mural opportunity was an invitation for local Syracuse artists to submit their designs, which were then voted on by the neighborhood that the call out was for within Syracuse. So it was this interesting collaboration of like pure artistic vision with the aspirations of the community that proposal was for. So in that way, like it was fully my conception, but also like I had to factor in like the context of the environment, which honestly is, as much as I do really work within like this surreal space within my own thoughts and like painting, and I also, context is very important to me, and I love that about public art. Ultimately, like I am not interested in promoting, how do I say this? I'm not interested in promoting solely like my artistic ego within public art, and I have always valued that it is an act of service to the betterment of the community and the environment that whatever piece interacts within. So I chose to ultimately, like, my mural depicts a young African American girl blowing a wish, and I applied for a different mural with a similar design. There were just a few things changed, but the subject was the same, and I knew ultimately that within public art, like, the way that we promote images is very important. And so then I started considering, like, who needs to be promoted, especially within Syracuse. And ultimately, there is a huge disparity between the way that our Syracuse culture has promoted certain iconography and the reality of the demographic that lives and works and struggles here. And, we have a huge disparity in income and class also in our city. So it felt only like the only answer. And it's been a tricky conversation because I am Hispanic, but white passing, and, to ultimately know that I'm in a service position as a mural artist, as a public artist, and to know that it felt only right to depict one of the most marginalized members of our community in Syracuse and also in the US, but also to know that, like, I'm creating a platform for this demographic, but not speaking for, has been an interesting tension and dynamic. So yeah, I ultimately, like, even with that mural, I knew that specifically not only an African American female, but also a child, and it felt like the only answer to the prompt of like what should be depicted in my mind. And moving forward, I would love to do a series of children, because I think ultimately, like, giving our children the opportunity to witness themselves within the images that we promote and like publish on a macro scale is how we invest in their personal confidence and power and in our future as communities. So
I loved you said that the child was blowing a wish, and what they're doing is they're blowing a dandelion, and my favorite part is that the dandelion fragments are blowing up into the stars, and I love that.
Aww.
It's so pretty.
Thank
it's beautiful.
you. Thank you so much.
What gets your creative juices flowing? I know you do a lot of different mediums. You tattoo, you paint, you do all sorts of different things. But is there anything outside of art that gets your creative juices flowing?
That's a great question.
Or different mediums that are a little different. I don't know how. You talked a little bit about music earlier. Like, do you like to listen to music too?
Oh yes, nonstop. Yeah, sound is very important for me. I'm learning how to be silent also, because that's important. But
which is not good for a podcast. Speak up.
I know. Yeah, no, music is so important. I also am quite fascinated with symbology and the tarot. I read tarot daily, multiple times a day. I'm really fascinated by myths and the ways that basically, like, throughout history, humanity has documented the human experience through stories and symbols, and the hero's journey is basically told over and over and over again throughout different modalities. So endless fascination there and endless inspiration, and it's definitely can be seen in my own personal work. The tarot and other depictions of the hero's journey are very relevant to my psyche.
I love that. Another struggle that artists have are running into creative blocks. Do you run into blocks, and how do you overcome them?
I would say I don't necessarily feel like at this point in my life any lack of inspiration. Where my blocks come are more so like learning how to balance. I'm definitely very ambitious and very I don't want to say because I've achieved everything that I've set out to do up until this point, but I'm learning how to temper my ambitions with, like, my physical health and rest and also patience. I've never had an issue with seeing and accessing, like, through fear when it comes to the creative process, and I think that's because I've had a lot of support from a young age. So in that regard,
You embrace that fear.
I do.
Yeah.
I actually kind of love it.
That's cool. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. The blocks are, more so like, okay, how do I find balance? How do I not, like, fully burn out?
Similar to myself, to me, when you run into a block from the few hours I've known you, you end up just trying to find a new medium, or how can that be transferred into a different way of expressing myself? And that's what I've come to admire about you, is that you don't find a wall, you don't hit a
You do find a wall because you're a real artist.
Yeah.
You don't hit a metaphorical wall. You just find a new way to go about it. You just have a different perception about it.
Yeah.
That's really inspiring. I love
Cool.
that.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that.
Uh-huh. Speaking of other mediums, what other hobbies do you have? Do you have things to get your mind off of these creations? Do you need to step back a little bit to let those thoughts to kind of just take a break? Or do you just let those thoughts go day in, day out, constantly thinking?
Yeah, well, I'm really passionate about movement. So I skateboard, I slackline, which is like walking on a tightrope. I love to climb, to rock climb. I'm just incredibly, I love biking, I love walking, I love being in nature. So these are kind of these things that I was talking about, like reconnecting with my health and my body, where like since the mural, like it was just, I painted this mural. It was 80 by 25 feet in like just over a month, which is kind of crazy. And it was like fully immersive, but also kind of took me away from my relationship to my movement, my body, and my health, and how important like that foundational like practice is to the rest of my life, my mental health, my spiritual, creative health. So I'm definitely learning how to re-center myself with the things, the hobbies and the practices that I love, that also kind of, it's not that creating doesn't give back to me, but you know, movement makes me feel confident and strong enough to access all of like my ambitions, you know. And specifically, I'd like to mention what I love about climbing, rock climbing, is that it makes me, every time I get on the wall, and I haven't in a few months, I would like to soon, but every time I get on the wall, you know, it makes me confront and push through this fear that kind of just like rules my entire life and just exists always, that I think we all kind of deal with on certain levels. And you know, the fear of like, oh, I'm not strong enough, like I can't take that next, you know, step, or like make that next move to like ascend in whatever way. And it really like is such a explicit metaphor for confronting other latent fears that block like creative flow, or even like relational. That's something that blocks or like limits me also, is like being in such a activated creative community. There's a lot of like interpersonal fears, you know. Yeah. So
that's interesting. I'm curious, do you think there's any connection between your love of climbing walls and painting on walls?
Oh, interesting.
I just curious.
Honestly, yeah, totally. And part of what was so fun is like being in a lift. Like I just love being like up.
Yeah, I visited your mural yesterday and just sat there for 5-10 minutes and just started coming up with questions. And one of them was, how do you get up there?
Yeah.
There's a few pictures of you on a ladder. And then further, like, what happens when you see a spot that you missed, or you wanted to go check something out? You have to get down from the ladder, move it across, go back up.
Yeah. So that was kind of why there was such a short timeline, because most of the wall, like probably, I would say 80 to 90% of the wall was only accessible via a lift. And it was a very specific lift because there's like a weird hill going up to the right to the wall. So it's like I couldn't use like a regular scissor lift. I had to get like an articulating lift, which goes out over, you know, like has a little like arm, and those are very expensive. It was like $3,500 for a month.
Did you fund this yourself?
Well, it's a part of the grant.
Okay.
So everything was kind of like, all of the budgeting was taken out of the allotment. So I didn't want to rent it for another month.
Gotcha.
So basically I had to get everything done while I had the lift. And then so the photos you see of me on a ladder were like some of the final days.
Yeah.
And yeah, the stuff that I didn't really get to achieve, like the lift couldn't even reach to certain areas that are like really far in the corner. And, you know, I kind of had to just be flexible to like change certain elements of the design, and also know that, like, you know, I'm very much a perfectionist when it comes to painting. And there are spots that, you know, aren't necessarily, like, if I had more time, if I had more endless resources, like, I would have done them differently. But I can't get up on the wall anymore, so it is what it is, and that's okay.
How do you decide while you're up there, or maybe even beforehand? I guess you can start by figuring out. I love you using the context of either the wall or the space to kind of help guide what might be on there. How do you decide once you're up there what's going to be a sharp line, or what might be a fuzzy, what's going to be colorful? I mean, just because you're such on the scale, you're right there, and then without having to step back and look at it and go, okay, that needs to be a really sharp, bold line over here, but you're just like right there. And the one video I've seen, you're just kind of slapping stuff up, but when you're done, it's dandelion. It's like, how does that happen?
Well, I would say, like, there's definitely a lot of standing back. So even when I had the lift, like, I would kind of like move the lift out and then come back. But I have been painting for a long time, where like I feel very confident, like, intuitively in certain like design choices, and I think that's informed by painting, but also tattooing, where, you know, there are certain aspects of like legibility that is necessary for a strong tattoo design that applies really well for murals, where, you know, like you're saying, like certain areas need to be really bold to kind of like ground the design, whereas like other areas, like in her face perhaps, like you know, there's a lot of like undertones, especially within melanated skin, but just skin in general, and also like that are very fluid, and, you know, so it's interesting, like, yes, working on such a macro scale was, you know, just a further exploration of principles that I've already kind of been developing over time, especially with also scenic painting for like play sets and film sets. You know, it's all about mastering illusion. And especially with like film, it has to be almost like exact, right? In a way.
Yeah.
But with plays, like there's kind of this impressionistic approach that is a little more, not only like, you know, necessary because of time, you know, play productions are usually shorter and the preparation for those sets is shorter, but also like the style.
It's a little bit more artistic freedom.
Yeah, and there's just an impressionism that lends better to like how these stories are being told.
Yeah, I can see that. In film, you're trying to get people into the real world, while on stage, you're just telling a story. Yeah. And it can be anything.
Yeah, so I feel like that's really helped me understand like which lines need to be crisp and which lines can be a little looser to still imply.
Now, you've talked about tattooing a little bit. Can you go into that? What drew you towards tattooing?
Well, I have known since I was in middle school that I wanted to be a tattoo artist. My dad used to let me like draw on him, and I'd draw on my sisters, and then I met one of my mentors, Igor Makushkin. He's actually the one that all the blacklight impressionism. Igor is quite a powerhouse, but I met him, and he kind of tattoos as a more experimental expression, and so I met him in 2018. I was 19, and he let me tattoo him, and it was my first time like ever holding a machine. And basically I was fascinated, and I asked him to help me like buy all the materials, and he did, and he kind of showed me how to set up a sterile workstation. And from there he was like, okay, like you're on your own. And so I had this interesting journey of basically like having this deep curiosity and magnetism towards this art form, but ultimately being self-guided until I moved into the gear factory and I started an apprenticeship with a very established tattoo artist. And that was an interesting exploration. Ultimately for me, tattooing within like a modern context doesn't really resonate for why I'm attracted to the practice. Tattooing is a very, the oldest human remains that have been found with like flesh preserved, like frozen, are tattooed. And most indigenous world cultures have a relationship with tattooing in whatever way. So it's kind of this like inherently human practice that is very sacred to storytelling. And so in a modern context, like I found, like I used to watch Ink Master, and I found like I was really turned off by the energy of this modern culture that is ultimately also rooted in patriarchy, honestly. And I felt that very strongly in my apprenticeship. He actually was on Ink Master 2 seasons, and he's a very talented artist, but he was entitled to his clients' bodies, saw them less as human and more as canvas.
Yeah, those shows it's such a cutthroat competition,
right,
when tattoo is not cutthroat nor a competition.
Yes, in fact, it's a very, it's very delicate and intimate,
expressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are very important tenets to like a tattoo practice, like obviously sanitation and consent and all of these things. Like it's not necessarily like, in some ways it's very rigid because it has to be, but in other ways, like I've learned how, I now have a private practice, and I've learned how to center my own, honestly, like spirituality with what I believe is like more of, like I serve my clients' higher journey, and I'm really interested in more and more working with people who trust me to mark them in a way that like maps out their power.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Do you find any comparisons between your painting, whether that be mural art, canvas art, and your tattooing? Is it similar styles, or are they completely different?
Yeah, I would say they definitely inform each other. Tattooing has there are so many different styles, and especially as like the culture around tattooing is opening and expanding, especially like there are a lot of really talented queer tattoo artists that I don't necessarily reside here in Syracuse, but that I follow like all over the world. And there are kind of like inherent limitations to tattoo because you're working with skin, you're working just with like certain inks, and while those limitations do exist, the boundaries are actively being explored and broken. And I am still, as I've taken a break from tattooing with my mural and my art show, and now I'm doing scenic painting, I'm really excited to return to my practice and bring these explorations into the kind of subjects that I'm tattooing. I really want to work more with sacred geometry.
I was just going to say, have you ever tattooed a dodecahedron?
I haven't. No. Okay. I started doing geometric dot work, and it's really, really fulfilling. Oh, okay. So, but yeah, the dodecahedron is kind of like this, it's kind of an elusive form. It changes in every direction, and it also represents, I could talk so much about the dodecahedron. it's like it's a whole thing.
That's great. I love it.
It's a lot. I do, okay, I'll just say this. Basically, the dodecahedron, at first it kind of like, I painted it once and I didn't really know why. And then I found out that, so each of the 5 platonic solids are associated with an element, and the dodeca is associated with the divine, which I was like, that's okay, I don't really understand. Turns out the ancient, like certain cultures of antiquity, so like the ancient Egyptians, the Babylonians, they believed, they had knowledge, the Romans, they had knowledge of, actually it'd be the Greeks, they had knowledge of the dodecahedron and all of the platonic solids, but within like these schools of esoteric knowledge, because it wasn't available to the public, even within the schools, the dodecahedron was hidden. So other shapes were made available to like initiates, but the dodecahedron was not. And they believed, these cultures believed, that this shape should be, its knowledge should be guarded because its power was so great that it could be abused. And it turns out that the first atomic bomb that was created during the Manhattan Project and dropped in New Mexico was actually a dodecahedron.
Interesting.
Because it's closest to a sphere while having the fewest sides, so it was able to achieve that critical mass in order to split.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I have seen pictures of that.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a
and Oppenheimer too.
On the movie Oppenheimer.
Yeah, and it is. It's a dodecahedron. So very fascinating.
Yeah.
These shapes are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Yeah.
Going further, are there any misconceptions with your craft? And now that could be tattooing, mural art.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
You know, I've heard recently, in the past too, but recently I think people perceive me to be pseudo-spiritual, or I think it's so interesting, like, being a human that makes mistakes and also is trying to learn to be a better human with other humans, and we're all like on that path in our own pace and in our own ways, and to also like take up space. And I do take up a lot of space, and I do like, the scale of my work is so large, and it's becoming even larger, and I am also very like learning how to shamelessly just continue to create as my heart like calls me to, and to know that like inevitably that does challenge people's preconceived notions of me, if they have them, or of themselves, so I found I can be and have historically been a controversial person within my community in certain regard, just because when humans interact, like, friction happens.
Mm-hmm. Humans will be humans.
Yes, exactly. So I'm learning how to reconcile like my own need to people please based off of like trauma and stuff, and be like good and be perceived as good, and also just be like, honestly, fuck it. So
it's such a hard balance, especially as an artist, because you want to express yourself, you want to be true to yourself, but at the same time you want to be able to be liked, or you want to be able to sell your product, or as a tattoo artist the only way you're going to do it is to be commissioned. And so that is very difficult.
Yeah. And also know that like it's not that I just want to be like brazenly myself with no regard for the people around me. I'm really actively learning how to be a better version of myself, like day by day, and have definitely not mastered that, but
I don't think anybody has. But you're just a student.
Right, exactly.
And speaking of being a student, would you recommend to go to school or take classes to build on their craft, such as mural work or tattooing? I know you didn't do that, but would you think that would be useful for people in the future?
I think it really depends on so many things. You know, I have always been very uninterested in debt. So I felt, you know, just it kind of felt like a no-brainer, but that's also because, again, I am self-funded.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also highly suspicious of institutions. But also I do recognize, like, that support is everything. So, like, where I am today is because of the support of my communities, my mentors, the ways that I've fallen into opportunity because of the network that I'm a part of. And I'm personally really passionate about supporting other young artists, especially young femme artists, that are navigating their own journey. Schooling is definitely something that still interests me, and I think if I ever went back to school, it'd be for music.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by music theory and the way that, like, you know, pretty much music is the language of sound, is like, yeah, the language of reality. So, but I guess like it just depends. I would say also, like, just as much as school is important, apprenticeships, like, you know, this is an ancient way of learning. You know, if there's a craft that, you know, for anyone who's listening, that, like, you're interested in, you know, learning about and progressing into, find someone who is really good at it and work with them and shadow them and be, like, curious.
Don't be nervous to reach out.
Yeah, be humble, be curious.
Mm-hmm. There's something that you said earlier that I find is hard for artists, especially without the experience or the expertise or the schooling or the apprenticeships. As you said, confidence. You've just always had that confidence to put that brush to the canvas. Do you have any advice for somebody who's either learning to get that confidence, or somebody like myself who I'm starting to do wall tags in theaters for the Hairspray National Tour, and I'm just so nervous to even put a brush stroke on the wall, or it's just my lines aren't that straight, or don't make me do font because, like, nobody can, my legibility is awful.
For sure.
So do you have any words of wisdom for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely taught a lot of, you know, like, people around me, because I've been taught, but I've, you know, from a young age. And so I guess that is to say, like, when I do teach, like, these fundamentals of, let's say, drawing or painting or movement, like, I've been a ski instructor, I've been a swim instructor, I teach skateboarding and slacklining, and in any context where I'm, like, leading someone out of their own fear and into this new relationship with a skill, it's, like, ultimately, like, fundamentally everything is mechanical, and every skill can be broken down into a series of steps. And I think ultimately, like, looking at the overall product is what really limits our ability to embark on the journey of learning a skill. So if you're interested in something like you're painting, start with, there's a lot of resources online. There's also, you know, a lot of, like, really knowledgeable people kind of all over the place. Start small, you know, and these basics, like, it really helps to have a mentor and it helps to have a teacher, and I do value that, but also, like, everything is built upon, and that's what's so I'm so neurodivergent and I never finish my sentences.
You're fine.
But, like, that's what's so very exciting to me about these shapes, the perfect solids, is that they kind of fundamentally build everything. And that can be said for any skill as well, is that, like, there are these really beautiful, simple blocks that ultimately, like, work up to whatever it is that you want to achieve.
No, I like what you said. Everything can be broken down into steps. Just break it down.
Yeah.
Just simplify it.
And have fun with it. Like,
have
enjoy
fun.
Learning.
Art's fun.
It's so fun, literally.
Don't forget, art's fun.
It's so fun.
How do you handle criticism, if you've gotten any criticism?
Yeah, totally. I feel like it coincides with, like, the way that I handle like just criticism also or like feedback as a person. And it's like I was thinking about this because we just started kind of like not necessarily art critiques, but like a monthly art conversation here at the Gear. And as I've learned how to understand like signals from my body and within my intuition about like where my center is, it's helped me receive feedback and take what resonates and then leave what doesn't. So I would say just like develop like a strong relationship with what, like as an artist or as a person, like to be true. And if someone says something or offers feedback that is threatening to your truth, then you probably don't need to really like integrate it. If they say something that can help you like develop and build, then that's something that can be integrated, I guess. And that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Oh, that's great. And then moving on, what's next for the world of your craft? You've been talking about tattooing, mural arts. Like, what's the next step?
Yeah, honestly,
more murals?
Definitely more murals. I'd really like to travel to different festivals and build geometric shapes. Okay. And maybe have like canvases on the shapes that get painted. Okay. So it's like a fractal kind of like faceted canvas. That's something I'm thinking about. I just want to like build more like structures is kind of what's coming. And I have my tattoo practice, and that'll kind of, it's nice because now I don't need to tattoo to subsidize my living or to support my bills, which is great because I just, those things in my mind don't really go together. Like I want to be able to tattoo like sovereign of my own livelihood. So I'll continue to tattoo, with the right people when it feels right. But I think in terms of like where I'm really dedicating my efforts, another mural this year would be swell. And yeah, like pushing the boundaries. I would love to get a grant or several to build geodesic sculptural domes that like refract light into rainbows and something like that. Yeah.
Cool. We'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, right.
Where can we see your work or work like it? I know you have an Instagram.
I do have an Instagram. I am really, it's not updated. I have so much content that needs to be edited. I haven't really even posted about the mural, let alone any of the other things I've been working toward, but I have a TikTok. I haven't posted anything. I hope to soon. But I would say mostly Instagram is
which is what?
It's metamorph.inc at Instagram.
At the whole Instagram thing.
Yeah.
That's my thing too, the whole social media. I don't know how to do the social media.
I know. It's a lot.
But that's like today, that's how you advertise yourself.
It's true. And it is an incredible resource that we have. So.
And not only for yourself, but for you to look at other artists as well. I mean, that's when I talk to artists and be like, where do you get your resources or what inspires you? And nearly every person just says the internet. I mean, just Instagram. Or a lot of people are like, where'd you go to school? And they say YouTube. Like you were talking about. Like nearly everything that you can learn or wish to learn and beyond is on the internet.
That's true.
And if you just kind of learn how to use the right keywords, there it is.
Yep.
You have that access too, which it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's kind of this like second enlightenment period,
Well, you said earlier talking about a renaissance in Syracuse, and I mean even in the renaissance within a renaissance, I do think nowadays, even post-COVID, we are hitting a new renaissance. We are getting these artists who were refrained for so long, constricted, and all they could do is just think. And now that the pandemic has sort of eased up, I'm really hoping to see a new renaissance. In my field, I think in musical theater we're going to see it, but across all mediums, I think we're going to see some really unique, cool art forms, if not whole new styles of art. And I'm just waiting.
Yeah, no, I agree. yeah, I'm really fascinated to see like how these expressions will just continue to build and evolve.
I think that's been my biggest admiration of you is your willingness and ambition and your passion to just go do it. And I think that's what I've learned the most from you, is being able to just go out there and do it. And just through that, you've gained this confidence that it's completely admirable. I
Thank
love
you.
that. It's great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And no one can take it away from you, once you build that confidence.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
No, just thank you for, holding space for, my story, and I love what you're doing. And I look forward to seeing how you stitch all these stories together as you travel across the country.
Appreciate it. And for the peekers out there, this is a really unique interview. I met Clove a couple hours ago. I reached out via social media. This is my first interview of doing something with somebody I've never met before. So this is great. This is what.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm the first stranger?
First stranger.
Oh, wow.
Anywho, thank you to all my peekers out there. Please let me know if there are any special or unique artists or art forms you think I should explore. This was recorded in Syracuse while I'm on the tour with Hairspray. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourselves and be kind to each other. I'm Scoob Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.